Hi, I'm Carrie Sharp. I'm the owner, founder of RD Bootcamp. Welcome to our podcast. This is Anna.
Hi everyone, I'm Anna, full name Anna Bisogno-Papa. I am a tutor for RD Boot Camp and also a clinical dietitian in the specialty eating disorders.
We are both here to help you connect real life practice with exam day success. All right, today's topic is bugs in action. We're going to talk about bacterial microorganisms. We're putting them on the hot seat today. I'm going to tell you a little story. As a child, I remember going to school one day. My mom packed me this egg salad sandwich. It was one of my favorite sandwiches. I loved it. I went to lunch. I had my sandwich. I had a great morning, and then we were back into class. And I just started not feeling well. And you're a little kid and you're kind of like, do I raise my hand? So I sat there and I sat there. And I mean, this was about 30 minutes after lunch. So I'm like, oof. And then finally I raised my hand and the teacher says, sure, Carrie, what's up? And I said, can I come talk to you? And I went up to her and I went up to her desk and I was really close to her. And I said, I don't feel well. And then all of a sudden I vomited right onto her shoes. It was so embarrassing, right?
Oh,
No, right in front of my entire elementary classroom. I don't remember what grade I was in, third maybe. I
goodness.
know. I know. So, listeners, this is what we're going to ask you. Think about what what microorganism, bacterial, that might have caused my foodborne illness.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thought to process on is what possibly could you have gotten sick from? Because I think what I think about is there's so many foods that could be at risk for contamination. And I even think about most recently the outbreak that's been in multiple fast food restaurants across the country. I was just reading articles this weekend about how multiple fast food restaurants had to recall their yellow onions. And not to yuck anyone's yum, but that is the first veggie I pick off my burger when I order
Oh,
burgers.
I love
I'm not
onions.
a, I cannot, I can't do the raw onions. It's not my thing. But now I'm even more glad that that's not my ingredient option because now all of these fast food restaurants, part of the CDC investigation is they're recalling all of those yellow onions. And even the farms themselves are recalling the onions and not allowing them to sell them. I think there's been more than hundreds of individuals and customers that got sick. So I'm very glad I'm not an onion consumer, but I definitely think about we always think about with these foodborne illnesses like undercooked beef, right? Because what they found was the onions were linked to E. coli. And when I think of E. coli, I think beef, not onions. But it is true, even our raw
Yeah.
fruits and veggies are at risk for contamination.
That's crazy. Yeah, sometimes like lettuce, you hear that on the news a lot too. Lettuce, you're like, lettuce, E. coli, that's weird.
Yep. Exactly, exactly. Like romaine lettuce, I know has been linked to E. coli before.
Yeah.
And what these customers must be experiencing, because E. coli is not something light to deal with, especially gastrointestinally.
Yeah.
I know folks report often diarrhea that can be bloody, nausea, abdominal pain, and sometimes a fever, right? Sometimes we could go febrile when we contract E. coli. Now, when we think about E. coli, now that I'm trying to remember raw fruits and veggies, I now think, okay, it can be found in undercooked beef. It can be found in unpasteurized milks if you're purchasing raw milk, right? And those raw fruits and veggies, including bean sprouts. Now, Carrie, I'm curious because when I order sandwiches, I always get the little warning. Beware. Are you sure you want to add sprouts? Why are they so commonly at risk for E. coli?
That's a great question. I know I love bean sprouts. Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. E. coli grows well, these names too. Why? Who came up with these microorganism names?
How do
E-
you pronounce the full name?
Escherichia coli.
Okay, I've been saying
Yeah.
Escherichia, so that's good to know. Escherichia, Esch,
Esch-
Escherichia coli. Okay,
Escherichia coli, yes.
heard.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I think part of what's on the test should be how do you pronounce these microorganisms? If you can pronounce them, then you know what they are.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, yeah, E. coli, believe it or not, grows naturally in the intestines of animals, plus us and humans. We are animals. The bacteria can contaminate bean sprouts during the farming, processing, and packaging.
Mm.
It's bean sprouts grow in warm, humid climates, so they're more ideal for bacterial growth because of the humidity, the heat. It's conducive for growth.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot
Mhm.
of sense. I will
Yeah.
continue to order them, but with caution.
Yes. Well, we can digest a little bit of E. coli. It's just too much.
Yep.
hmm
Very cool.
Yeah, I have a story. Do you want to hear one?
Let's do it.
Oh, wait, I think we have a fun mnemonic for E. coli, don't we? Something silly.
Yes, I think
Yeah.
something that we can remember from E. coli is the mnemonic. If you think about often it's gastrointestinal symptoms, think, oh crap, in one day that bloody meat made me sick. Because when we talk about the onset of E. coli, right, it's 1 to 3 days. So within 72 hours, oh crap, that bloody meat made me sick. That's a good mnemonic to remember.
Sometimes the best mnemonics are the the ones that are embarrassing to say out loud.
Exactly, just to think in your mind. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Oh, I remember when I was a child. I guess everything's in my childhood right now for some reason,
Yeah.
but well, I mean, actually, not even in my childhood. Every time I go visit my parents, there's this ice cream shop that I grew up on. I even worked there when I was a teenager.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Oh, I love this ice cream shop. It was homemade right there on the spot. This, mom and pop's place. It had been there forever. The place to go in the summer, the line was like 100 people long. It was like this, everybody wants to go.
Yeah.
But a few years ago, they had, I don't know if you guys can guess this, but what microorganism do you think? Can you think of it, Anna? Which one is one that's the most, if you think ice cream?
We're talking Listeria.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh
Pronounce.
no.
Yeah. Listeria monocytogenes. I know. We'll just
There
keep it
we
to
go.
Listeria. But yeah, this ice cream shop, it was found in pretty much almost all of their ice cream. So it must have been something, the bacteria must have grown in their facility, like on their equipment. So it contaminated all of their flavors. Yeah, what a shame, right?
What a shame, because it sounds like they were a great mom and pop place. But yeah, anything right, unpasteurized milk and commonly dairy products. Wow. You would never think about that when you're going to your ice cream shop.
I know. And Listeria is scary because it can
Yeah.
be deadly. It's one of the
Yeah.
ones that we really have to be careful of. And it's hard to diagnose too because it can mimic other illnesses. So vomiting, nausea, fever, muscle aches, headaches, neck stiffness. It's like kind of a weird one where you're like, oh, I might have the flu, but it could be Listeria. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the people that are at highest at risk are women that are pregnant and an ice cream shop. Unfortunately, an ice cream shop in Florida, it's elderly and young children are going to visit this ice cream shop.
Yeah.
So that's grandparents and their grandchildren. They're very high risk and people with weakened immune systems. And I would say that's probably the case for most foodborne illnesses. So yeah, and the ice cream it doesn't smell or taste spoiled. So
Right.
you don't know. Yeah. I'm not saying don't go eat ice cream. I'm just saying that there is a risk for infection. What is your
Absolutely.
favorite ice cream flavor?
Oh, see, that's hard. I'm usually a chocolate chip cookie dough person or a coffee person. I could swing
Hmm,
either way, but I can't do chocolate. It's my last favorite ice cream flavor. What's your
interesting.
what's your favorite flavor?
I this is kind of going to sound bizarre, but mint chocolate chip.
No, I think that would be on my third. I think it gets a lot of hate,
Okay.
chocolate
Yes,
chip, but I love it. I think it's
I love it.
delicious.
Yeah. I would ride my bike with my dad and we'd get mint. I'd get my mint chocolate chip and he'd get his plain chocolate chip. And I think it was because it was green. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, I want the green one. And so it became my favorite.
Oh, it's a good
Yeah.
memory, but I think that's real, right? Is even our local shops can be at risk for contamination. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, even just thinking about going back to how it could be in dairy, it could be in our veggies. I think about how even different types of bacteria can exist in the same food item, right? Like raw fruits and veggies might have a risk for E. coli. But I was just reading, I don't know why I'm on my foodborne illness outbreak article research trip this month, but it seems like a lot of places are coming out with outbreaks. So I was diving deep, and it seems like in 2015, there was a link to a very popular fast food chain in Minnesota. So many people were developing febrile gastroenteritis, and within days of eating at this similar restaurant, and they actually linked it to be salmonella from raw tomatoes. And again, with salmonella, I'm thinking of our other cooked
Tomatoes.
meats, but yeah, tomatoes. And that is something I will put in everything. So that was a surprise. And I think more than 54 people were linked to. And when we're talking about febrile gastroenteritis for our listeners, that is when we have fever, we have diarrhea, abdominal pain, any other inflammatory symptoms. It's the inflammation, right, of our gastrointestinal symptoms. So it was so interesting too, thinking about onset, because within days, these people were having symptoms. And I think, how do you even know where to link it to if the CDC didn't do that investigation? Because think of the variety of foods we eat on a day-to-day basis. It can be hard to tell what it's actually linked to, but they did find within 48 hours they developed symptoms of salmonella.
Wow. Yeah, Listeria is about the same, 9 to 48 hours. Same
Yeah,
onset. Interesting.
it
I
is interesting.
I think you and I could share a sandwich because I'm not a big fan of tomatoes and I love onions. So I'll give you the salmonella and you
Yeah,
you can give me
I'll
the
take
E.
it.
coli and we'll call it a day.
Exactly. And they have, and see, Salmonella and E. coli, they're similar too, because again, gastrointestinal, right? With Salmonella, you're going to have diarrhea, you're going to have abdominal cramps, fever. And the onset, like you said, it's as short as 6 hours to 48. So could get it within any of those 2 days. Now, again, salmonella, we might think most commonly poultry, right? Or eggs. I think of salmonella too. But again, we must remember it can be in our unpasteurized milk products as well, thinking about Listeria and our contaminated raw fruits and veggies. So no one is safe when it comes to salmonella. Now, a mnemonic that I think it could be really cool to remember is if we think about salmonella, that beginning part salmon, we think about chicken and its coloration. We could say the salmon colored chicken needs to cook for 6 to 48 hours or you will get diarrhea. So again, the
Yes.
salmon colored chicken needs to cook for 6 to 48 hours, or you will get diarrhea. And
Okay.
that's our mnemonic for salmonella.
Well,
Uh,
I'd like to avoid that. So,
Well, while we're on the topic, I think we're dinging up all of the outbreaks. Do you have any more stories, Carrie, to share?
oh, when I had babies a long, long time ago, well, not that long, but I did, yes. And the doctors kept saying, "Don't give raw honey to your baby until they're
Yeah.
at least 2 years old." And I wasn't a dietitian then, so I had no idea why. I'm like, why? Is it the sugar? Are they gonna? I had no idea why.
Wow.
But now, yeah. And do you remember the whenever you go to like a big buffet and they had the potatoes and the baked potatoes in the foil?
Yes.
Yeah, it's the same thing. That's not even really done so much anymore. But it's because it's a risk for, oh, let's see if I can pronounce this. Clostridium botulinum. But luckily we have a nice little nickname for it, botulism. So we're just going to go with that. But yeah,
Yep.
it puts them at a risk for this bacteria that must grow in honey. It
Wow.
grows
Yeah.
in the potatoes that are in the aluminum foil. It must be like a heat thing.
Yeah.
but also improperly canned foods. Or if you go to the grocery store, have you ever gone to the grocery store and you pull the cans and you're like, that has a dent in it? Oh,
Yes.
maybe I'll get it cheaper. What? No, that's
Yep.
great. Maybe you'll get it cheaper, but you could end up with botulism. So maybe
Yep.
you should put it back on the shelf or give it to the worker and say, hey, please, we should take this
That's
off.
smart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also fermented foods, and fermented foods are real popular right now because of prebiotics, but be careful because you are at a risk for botulism.
Yeah. Wow. I think about that when I receive dented cans. That's my first thought. And when people do homemade canning, because I know a lot of folks, it's very popular nowadays to do homemade canning. It's my number one fear is developing botulism in my canned good. So,
Yeah,
no.
I did that once. I made my own apple butter.
Oh,
Yeah, and then I ate it, and then the next day I ate it, and I tried to figure out canning, and it was a disaster. And I was like, I better not do this. I don't- yeah,
maybe better off. Yeah, let
we
the experts do it.
exactly. It was probably was not. It was delicious, but yes. So a fun mnemonic that we've come up with, because there are with botulism, it's actually the signs and symptoms are more extreme. You're not really looking at diarrhea, vomiting, the typical symptoms. You're looking at double vision, like a blurred vision, double vision, seeing weird, like affecting the nerves in your eyes,
Mm,
muscle weakness, even paralysis, and it can lead to death. So it affects the nerves.
yep.
So our fun, silly mnemonic. The patient was paralyzed with fear, so she gave the doctor honey. Oh no, the eye surgery that took 18 hours was botched. I don't know, I guess it's like two mnemonics in one. But still,
The two in one.
the idea is if just to try and remember things, just come up with something silly because sometimes when
Yep.
it makes no sense or it's just silly, you remember it even more.
Yep. I always used to say before the exam, baby botulism. And that's how I remember it.
Maybe
Just
botulism. Oh, that's a
baby
good one.
botulism.
Yeah.
And
Wonder
that helped me. Yeah.
I wonder what would happen if we took if we took honey to a picnic or these baked potatoes wrapped in foil to a picnic. Now, would
Yep.
that be botulism or would we head in a different direction with bacterial microorganisms?
Oh, that's very true. That's very true. Yeah. I know because I even thinking about how some of these are through the actual contamination of the meat, the veggies themselves. There's another type of way to, get a foodborne illness, and I think about improper hand washing. I don't know if you have any stories, but I think about, I'll go back to my childhood. When I was around 9 or 10, maybe, I was pretty young. My dad and I used to go on our, daddy-daughter dinner dates, and we went to my favorite Japanese restaurant. It was, we went there a bunch of times. It was like very close to our hometown. And I remember I ordered my same similar meal that I always ordered, vegetable tempura, which for our listeners, if you don't know, it's deliciously fried veggies which to me, I feel like is the safest food to order, right? It's fried at a really high temp, it's vegetables, so it's no worries about undercooked meats or seafood. However, when I think about the time that I ate that vegetable tempura, I was sick as a dog afterwards. I remember within hours I went home, similar to your story, Carrie. I mean, it was truly within hours. I went home,
Mhm.
I was vomiting. I was so sick. And I was thinking, me and my dad were perplexed. How could I get sick from tempura vegetables? And I thought about now after my years of, being in dietetics, poor hand washing. And that is how we get, listeners, Staphylococcus aureus.
Oh,
Yeah, it was
yeah.
bad.
Oh, I guess if we just kind of bounce back to like E. coli, Salmonella, how it gets in the vegetables, and
Yep,
it's because of, I guess, in a sense, the animals not
yep,
washing their hands because
yeah,
the animal feces gets into the soil and it gets into our vegetables. So I
yep.
guess same concept, but they don't mean to do it.
Exactly. Or water runoff, like that
Yeah.
one romaine lettuce outbreak. And this is why it's so important for restaurants to follow and farms, right? Food safety guidelines, but also serve safe guidelines. It is so important to properly hand wash. And that's why your food service managers will remind you, please wash your hands before you're serving. Because I'm assuming that's what happened because I was sick, very soon after, and it was not pretty,
What do
not
you
pretty.
think caused it? What microorganism?
I think it was Staph aureus. I think it was. And I think about even from my microorganisms lab, when we swabbed our noses, staph is up here. Staph is everywhere. We don't think about that, but Staphylococcus aureus is pretty widespread on the body. It can exist like right under our skin. So I'm pretty sure it was that, especially since it was mostly vomiting and diarrhea. And I mean, the onset is 30 minutes to 8 hours. So it was pretty soon after I was feeling sick. And again, this could be found in even unrefrigerated or improperly refrigerated meals, potato and egg salad. So I'm thinking about picnics. If you're bringing a potato salad to a picnic, that also could be. Right. And egg salads, which is a hint, hint, can also be contaminated with Staph aureus.
Yeah.
And like I mentioned, through food handlers. So for our food handlers, for those in food service, or if you're thinking about going to food service, please be mindful of those serve safe guidelines and washing your hands. Now, a mnemonic carry that I'm thinking of that we can come up with is at the company picnic. Staffy scooped the potato salad with her bare hands and
Oh,
30 minutes later was running to the bathroom. So Staffy, no scooping potato salad with your bare hands.
and probably all the people after her.
Exactly. Exactly.
Oh, that's
But that was, yeah, that was ooh, just thinking about those types of stories. And for our listeners, when even thinking about in the beginning, right, your experiences with food poisoning, it really sticks with you. Like I haven't eaten vegetable tempura since. I can't. I need to expose that back into my
yes,
diet.
that's a shame because I do still eat egg salad. So,
Good.
yep,
Good.
yep, it
I'm
didn't scare
envious.
me off.
Good.
Although I was a kid and I didn't know what caused it, but now,
Yeah, now we know. Yep.
yeah, once I studied this, I was like, oh, that was it. Now I know what it was.
Uh,
Yeah, it's very interesting. Some microorganisms are mild. You just get a little
yeah.
sick, but some are really scary. They can
Yeah.
be deadly, like Listeria, botulism, and the flesh-eating bacteria.
Yes. Oof.
That's a
Oof.
really scary one.
Yes.
Yeah, I was in Florida for I guess we're noticing a pattern of Florida here. I grew up in
Lord.
Florida. Um, and I was there this past summer and there were two hurricanes in a row. I was luckily I was there to help out. It's warm out, so you're wearing shorts and sandals or whatever. And I developed this rash on both of my legs. It was a little scary. And right, I know, like all over my legs, they just popped up. And
Oh,
I looked at it. Yeah. Okay, so my father's a doctor, retired doctor, and he looked at me and he's just with these eyes like, you've been outside in the murky water helping, and you could have caught anything, any of these bacterias. And he got a little scared because he was thinking of the flesh-eating bacteria, which is called Vibrio vulnificus.
Vibrio vulnificus. It sounds like a
Vibrio.
Harry Potter spell.
Yes, I know. I love the name. I like to say it like over and over. Vibrio vulnificus. But
Mm.
it's very scary. Yeah. It's the one that the onset is 4 to 96 hours. It happens fast and you have to be rushed to the ER. You could lose a limb, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's looking at me like, oh my, yikes. Are you going to lose your legs? So we're panicking, but he looked at my legs. I didn't have any open wounds because usually what happens
Good.
is, yeah, it gets into an open wound. So I did not have that, but I was walking through like this brackish water.
Mm.
Yeah, it was a little scary, right?
How did it
Well,
end up? Everything was safe.
yeah, so there's something called contact dermatitis, which is like poison
Yeah.
ivy, poison oak kind of thing, and that's what it ended up being. But we were
Ooh,
also looking at the
yes.
signs and symptoms of the Vibrio vulnificus is watery diarrhea, which luckily I had none of that, vomiting, none
Yeah.
of that. So really mine was just visual rash,
Yeah.
nausea, abdominal cramps. So it's definitely hits the gut. Then you can get a fever, but the red and swollen tissue around a wound is a big one. Mine
Mm,
is more like a rash all over versus, again, an open wound where it
yeah.
starts getting swollen, red, and then necrotizing fasciitis kicks in and it really just starts kind of eating away. So whew. So in
Oh,
extreme cases, yeah, it can lead to amputation or death. So it was kind of scary because the situation is that murky water. I was in a situation where it could have been. Just knock
yeah.
on wood.
Ooh,
I know, I know.
that's my
Yeah.
worst fear. That is my worst fear.
I didn't even think about it. I was just there helping and then you realize later the risks. So
Yeah.
this is a big risk.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So we're
Bacteria loves water.
yep, and warm, humid climates
Warm, humid
again.
climate.
Yeah, it can be found also if you uh, eating raw oysters, raw shellfish. It can be an undercooked or raw shellfish and oysters.
Mm,
And then the other one is the open wound. And that's a lot of you hear stories on the news where people were swimming in a lake and
yeah.
ended up with this, right? Because
Yes.
they had an open wound.
I think that's most commonly where I've heard of it. It's like still water, lakes, all of that, 100%. And now oysters. I'll have to tell my friends they do an oyster shucking contest near me in
Oh,
the city. So I have to warn them, make sure they're
yeah.
taking good care of their yeah, their oysters.
I guess growing up in Florida, we have oyster bars, but there was always that big sign,
Yep.
be careful of the oysters,
That
risk
makes
of
sense.
illness. Yeah.
Yes. Oh,
You knew it
wow.
when you were eating them.
Yeah.
A fun mnemonic, because Vibrio vulnificus reminds me of a vulture. I don't know
Yeah.
why.
Yeah.
I guess the name sounds vampirish, flesh eating, flesh eating, and vultures. They feed on the vulture dove into brackish water with a cut on its leg, bumped into an oyster, then came out with a flesh eating bacteria riding its back. Just imagine it in your
The
head.
visual,
Yeah.
visual, great.
Yeah, yeah. But these are all of the ones that we have discussed are in our program in the RD Bootcamp prep course. So if you want to review them again, you're more than welcome to.
Mhm.
We end every episode with a couple things. One, it'll be key items to remember, and then we'll have some fun closing remarks. Key items to remember, we're just going to kind of review each one so that you can try and remember them for your test prep. E. coli, so pronunciation Escherichia coli. Signs and symptoms, it's diarrhea and it's often bloody, nausea, abdominal pain, and sometimes a fever. Onset is about 1 to 3 days, and it's found in water or food contaminated with human feces or animal feces,
Mm.
uncooked beef, which is the one we really remember with E. coli, unpasteurized milk, and those raw fruits and vegetables. Listeria monocytogenes. I'm sorry, the pronunciations
Pronunciations.
sometimes get you. But if you want to read them, again, they're in our program. Signs and symptoms, diarrhea, abdominal cramps, meningitis, neonatal sepsis, fever. Onset is about 9 to 48 hours, and unpasteurized milk products, ready to eat deli meats are what it tends to be found in, like ice cream, and ice cream, milk products. Salmonella, Symptoms, diarrhea, abdominal cramps, fever. So some of these are more nerve related, some are more gastrointestinal. Onset is about 6 to 48 hours, and it's found, and this is the one we remember, the eggs, the poultry, meat. It's also some unpasteurized milk products and contamination with raw fruits and vegetables. It's also, I don't know if we talked about this, but if you're cutting chicken on a cutting board and then
Mhm.
you don't wash the cutting board or change the cutting board, it's a real high risk of spreading into those
Yep.
fruits and vegetables that way too.
Oh yeah, that is the first thing I tell my clients and my patients is make sure you have separate cutting boards. Even washing, I'm nervous about. Just make sure you got two separate cutting boards for when it's raw versus cooked, or if you're cutting up veggies, do not put them on the raw chicken cutting board.
Exactly. Exactly. Clostridium botulinum. Ay, ay, ay.
Do it.
Botulism. Signs and symptoms are double vision or blurred vision, muscle weakness, paralysis, and could lead to death. 18 to 36 hours is the onset, and it's found in raw honey. So remember, raw honey, don't give it to infants up to age 2. Improperly canned foods or dented cans, improperly canned home preserved foods, fermented foods, and baked potatoes that are in aluminum foil. So try and avoid those.
Mm.
Staphylococcus aureus, diarrhea, the signs and symptoms, diarrhea, vomiting, and it can come on about 30 minutes to 8 hours. This one, we also kind of consider it like the picnic bug.
Yep.
It can be found in unrefrigerated or improperly refrigerated meats, potato and egg salads, especially when they've been sitting out in the sun. And through this is the hand washing through food handlers who do not wash their hands, especially when preparing foods that do not require cooking. And even foods that have been cooked, but then they're putting it on a plate to give.
Yep. Yep.
And then the really scary one, Vibrio vulnificus, are flesh-eating bacteria. Signs and symptoms are watery diarrhea, vomiting, nausea, abdominal cramps, fever, and that red and swollen tissue that you find around the wound, and then necrotizing fasciitis. Oh, these pronunciations. And that's where it spreads. The cells die and they spread. And in extreme cases, you could end up with a limb amputation or lead to death.
Mhm.
Onset is fast. It's 4 hours to 96 hours. It usually happens fast. You got to get to the hospital fast.
Yeah.
And how you get it? It's found when you eat undercooked raw shellfish, especially oysters, and when an open wound is exposed to salt water or brackish water, especially situations like after a hurricane.
Hurricane. Oof. Good to,
Yeah.
good to know. I think that was a great wrap up of all of our hot seat bacteria. We've exposed them all. And now, as we do our cool down and closer, Kari mentioned before that when she ate her egg salad, she got very sick. So, for listeners, if you were thinking about what microorganism Kari got sick with, think about it. What was your answer? Because the answer is Staphylococcus aureus. I think that is the most likely out of all of our bacteria that would cause, right? That egg salad. We think about the potato salad and egg salad. Those are high at risk for Staphylococcus aureus. So that is the answer to that original question.
Yeah. And situational learning, if you spend time talking to people to remember a lot of these microorganisms, and we only touched on some of them,
Yep.
go ask your friends, your family members, colleagues, like, have you ever been sick with a microorganism? What did you eat? What happened? Or were you scared that you might have one? And that is the strategy on how you remember
Yep.
these for the test. I remember
Yep.
taking the test and I went, oh, my uncle has that. Oh, yeah, my kid had that, and or I saw that at the farmer's market last week. So
Yeah.
I remember thinking about these scenarios or parts of my life, and it made some of these questions answerable.
Yep. I think that's a great strategy, and it's something that helped me too, is what is the real life application? What's happened in my own experience that can help me remember this? I think that's a
Yeah.
great strategy.
Yeah. Yeah. So, for all of you listeners, RD Boot Camp, we are a RD exam prep course program. It's designed for all styles of learning. We have entertaining scenario-based videos. We have walkthrough calculations, instructor-led on-demand classes, flashcards, outlines of information, live classes that are included in your access time, your membership. We have tutoring sessions that you can sign up for. We have all sorts of things to help you prepare and feel confident for the art exam. So thank you, everybody. Happy
Yep.
studying, and we'll see you for the next one.
See you for the next one.
Bye.